Hello and welcome to Nigeria, the road to 2019, a series of programs where Arise News places the audience and the choice at the heart of our coverage of the upcoming presidential elections. I'm Charles Anyagoro. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, all the news, comment and analysis that provide unrivaled insight into Nigeria 2019, including Nigeria's Chief Justice faces trial for allegedly breaching rules around the declaration of assets, the first time a serving Chief Justice has ever been charged whilst in office. But with 1 month to go before a presidential election in Africa's most populous country, there is heightened concern that it could destabilize the judiciary and cause a constitutional crisis. We speak to the president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Paul Usoro. And later, as 61 political parties threatened to head to court to try to stop the Independent National Electoral Commission from implementing some of its guidelines and regulations for the upcoming election, we speak to one of the parties that's ranged against INEC, and we ask, what's all the fuss about? We'll begin though with Nigeria's Chief Justice Walter Onogan. He's often said that he's doing his best to fight for justice. Well, now he's got to fight harder than usual to defend himself against an unprecedented move by the Code of Conduct Tribunal to initiate proceedings against him. The charges are that he failed to properly declare his assets as required by law, and that he made large payments of US dollars, British pounds and euros into personal accounts which he allegedly did not declare were his. The tribunal has marshalled 6 separate counts against Chief Justice Onogan, each of them having the potential to almost irreparably damage the reputation of the Chief Justice and the independence of the Nigerian judiciary. In the circumstances, there's been an avalanche of criticism and rebuke trailing the move, with some alleging an attempt by the ruling APC party of President Buhari to intimidate and perhaps even destroy the judiciary ahead of the upcoming election, with a view to rigging the ballot in the APC's favour, a charge which the APC and the government have robustly denied. Well, one group that has come out strongly in favour of Chief Justice Onogan is the Nigerian Bar Association. Its president is Paul Usoro, and he joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. We appreciate it. We know it's been a busy day for you. Just briefly bring us the day with regard to what has happened in courts today, both at the Code of Conduct Tribunal and at the National Industrial Court.
Thank you for having me, Charles. First, let me explain what happened at the Code of Conduct Tribunal today. Today was the first day that the matter came up, and essentially what the tribunal wanted was for the Chief Justice to be present in courts today. Of course, he was not present in courts, and the reason he was not present in courts was because he was not served with the processes in regard to this matter. And that was explained to the courts, and ultimately the parties agreed that he would need to be served personally, and then the matter was adjourned to next week. That's essentially what happened today, nothing more than that. Now, the other thing that has happened, which is not at that particular theater, was that at the industrial courts, the courts, a judge of the industrial courts has granted an ex parte order, essentially asking the Code of Conduct Tribunal not to proceed with the hearing of this matter until the substantive application has been heard. In other words, there is a substantive application that is before the industrial courts that seeks to stop the court of the tribunal from entertaining this matter, because it does not have jurisdiction. That particular motion, incidentally, has also been filed at the tribunal itself, indicating that the tribunal does not have the jurisdiction to try this particular matter. Now, what has happened is the industrial courts has actually ordered the tribunal and directed the tribunal not to proceed with the matter pending the hearing of the matter before.
Right, and it has the capacity to do that.
I believe it has the capacity to do that. There are some who feel that it doesn't have the capacity to do that. I can tell you my own perspective on this.
Please.
Now, one of the things that some of the people who say that the industrial courts does not have the capacity to do that, according to them, is because the industrial courts and the Code of Conduct Tribunal they're courts of coordinate jurisdiction.
Right.
And that one cannot make an order against the other one. But in the real sense of it, I think, and this is with great respect to the Code of Conduct Tribunal, it's actually a misnomer to consider the Code of Conduct Tribunal as a court properly so called.
That's a good point, and a good point to be clarified,
Yes.
especially for our viewers who don't understand these things.
That's right, yes. You see, the Constitution is the documents, the legal instrument that establishes courts. And it has specified the courts that we have, the regular courts that we have. Even the industrial courts, it wasn't until a recent constitutional amendment that it was made to be one of the courts that is established by the Constitution. And those courts include the federal high courts, the states courts, and then of course the appellate courts. Those are the courts properly so called as recognized by the Constitution. Now, the Code of Conduct Tribunal does not fall under those courts.
Right.
Indeed, we can take it a step further. The Code of Conduct Tribunal, as everybody, well, not everybody, as lawyers would know, is not one of the courts or tribunals that comes under the supervision of the National Judicial Council.
Right.
All the courts that I have mentioned, they come under the supervision of the National Judicial Council. The judges that sit on those courts, they have to be recommended for appointment by the Federal Judicial Service Commission and then the National Judicial Council. In the case of the Code of Conduct Tribunal, it is actually a body that is under the presidency and in particular under the secretary to the government of the federation.
So arguably it's not technically a judicial body.
No, it's not. It is actually under the executive.
Right.
It's reports to the executive. And if you also look at it from that perspective, then it makes a lot of sense that really the argument that we are promoting, which is that due process has to be followed as far as the Chief Justice's matter is concerned.
Right.
And the matter should be referred to the National Judicial Council, which is the judicial body that supervises and disciplines judges. That makes a whole lot of sense.
Right. Well, I want to get to that in a minute because that's a very contentious issue at the moment. But let me just ask you, beyond the Code of Conduct Tribunal, what about the National Industrial Court? Because there's been some discussion that it's an industrial court, and why does it have jurisdiction to hear this case and take a decision on it?
The reason why I believe they went to the industrial courts is because there is an issue of employment here.
Right, so it's a labor-related question.
It's a labor-related issue.
That answers the question for me. So in some ways, a Pyrrhic victory of sorts for the Chief Justice today, because the case is clearly not over yet.
No.
What is your reaction as a lawyer yourself and president of the Nigerian Bar Association to this move to put the Chief Justice of Nigeria on trial in the first place for allegedly breaching asset declaration rules?
My own take as far as that issue is concerned, I'm not going to get into the merits of it, whether the Chief Justice had breached or he had not breached the provisions of the Constitution relating to declaration of assets. But my own take is there is a process that has been established by the Constitution where it is believed that any judicial officer has infracted the law. Then what needs to be done is for the matter to be taken to the National Judicial Council. And there is a reason why that is so. it preserves the dignity of that institution. That is an institution that we need to preserve its dignity.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, that is, I think most people would agree with you, but I want to get to that question of the National Judicial Council in a minute. But
right, yeah.
just listening to what you said previously, in your assessment then, is this a cynical use of the law of asset declaration, essentially attempting to hide behind it, when in fact the destructive significance of this goes much further than that?
I will tell you what I can see, and
Right.
I am not the only Nigerian who can see this. Somehow there has developed this habit of the Nigerian government, when they wish to do away with people or they wish people to resign, then they come up with a charge. They come up with some allegation and they haul you up before, for example, the Code of Conduct Tribunal. And the next thing you're going to hear, and we've already started to hear the beginnings of that urgings, is that since you have been arraigned before some tribunal or you've been arraigned before a court, you have to step aside. It's been done in so many cases, but the very recent one that you can easily recall, and we were all living witnesses, was the case of the Senate President. The Senate President was hauled before the same tribunal, and the battle cry from everywhere was, oh, he's standing at a trial before the tribunal, he needs to be removed. For me, what I see is this is simply an attempt to remove the Chief Justice of Nigeria.
But surely this is not a specious claim, is it? I mean, the Chief Justice appears to have breached the law here.
Well, you see, the principle of law is everyone is innocent.
I understand that.
Until proven guilty.
I understand that. But surely the Chief Justice, who is the head of the judiciary, must know that you have to follow the law scrupulously. And from what has been alleged in the charges filed against him, he apparently has not done so. I mean, that really should be worrying for people in Nigeria, shouldn't
Charles,
it?
how would you know that he doesn't have a defense when
Well,
the
because
matter has not
according
been
to the
heard?
public statements he's made so far, which have been published and are in the public eye,
Right.
he's saying that, oh, there's an error, he didn't understand this, he didn't see this. I mean, the concern, I understand where you're coming from,
Yeah.
that the concern, that there is concern that, never mind what the charges are, that hauling him in front of the Code of Conduct Tribunal has not been done properly or correctly.
Yes.
But let me just be clear on the issues around that, because you're the legal person. According to an appeals court decision in 2017, judges cannot be, as you said, directly taken to court on whatever charges before first going to the National Judicial Council. Is that the precedent on which this is being, the points you're making are being sort of set?
Okay, I'm going to address that particular issue,
Right.
but let me go to the first one that you mentioned. You see, as lawyers, and we must be very careful in the precedents that we set. As lawyers, one of the basic principles is that you're not guilty until you have been proven guilty. Even when
Proven innocent.
innocent. No, you're supposed to be proven guilty, not innocent.
Right,
It's your guilt that needs to be proved.
right.
Not your innocence.
Yes, that's true. You're innocent until proven guilty.
Yes,
right.
you're innocent until proven guilty. Now, even when somebody who has committed a crime, and I'm talking of a real crime, confesses to the police, the principle still applies.
Right.
Because he may still, when the matter comes up before the court, he may have a defense.
Right.
Those defenses, it may not even be in his confessional statements. It might be a different thing, and he would have the opportunity to raise it. Now, I believe that the Chief Justice, that principle applies as much to him as it applies to any other person who may be charged with any other criminal infraction. He's innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
Now, that is one part of it. The second part of it, of which you have just touched, is this I'm looking for the best word for it, but it's become a habit for prosecuting agencies to try people in the media. You've just referred to a document that you read.
Right, but it's not unique to Nigeria, though.
Oh, in England, do they do that?
Well, I mean,
No, you tell me. Do they
there's so
publish
many
the
cases.
statements?
Look at the issues of a lot of people who are hauled before courts and so on. I mean, you usually get that
I just asked you,
examination.
in England, do they publish the statements of people? They get the statements. Do they reveal? I know that in England they do not.
No. What I mean is that if the Chief Justice is making a case, I mean, if you look at people like Harvey Weinstein, I'm not comparing the Chief Justice to him, but obviously he makes a defense for himself to say, well, I didn't do this. These are the circumstances for me. But when we get to a court of law, we'll make that decision. I mean, it's so to that extent, that part of it is in the public interest.
I understand that.
Yeah.
It is not in the public interest, incidentally, because I know in the US and in the UK, it's not only in the UK, there is actually a prohibition as far as media trials are concerned.
Yeah, there is a limitation on what it's a set of things like D-notices where there's a limit on the things that, the press can report and they can't report. But
in particular, and this is the point I am making, you do not find the prosecution agency in the United Kingdom releasing those documents the way it is done in Nigeria. It's absolutely wrong. And you know why it is wrong? Because ultimately, there is a possibility that you might find that person to be innocent, but you have destroyed his character.
Yeah, but I have to say that that's not unique to Nigeria. But let's just move on and get to a very important aspect of this, which you raised earlier, and that is the fact that for propriety to prevail, any issue around the integrity of a judge or a justice or whatever has to be taken before the National Judicial Council.
That's right.
Now, the problem is that the National Judicial Council is headed by the Chief Justice himself, and 19 out of the 25 members of the council are actually appointed by the Chief Justice. So clearly that presents a problem about whether he can jimmy or fix his own case, doesn't it?
19 out of how many?
19 out of 25, from what I've seen. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. Now let me address that particular issue for you. The issue that you have raised is similar to saying that the chairman of a board cannot be disciplined by the board simply because he's the chairman, and the committees, for example, that have to do nominations, they report to him. But that is not the case. That is not what happens. The board of any company can still discipline and can it remove its chairman.
Yeah, but we're not talking about a board. We're
yes,
talking about
but
the National Judicial. I mean,
it
I
almost
understand you're
gets round
trying
to the same thing.
to make an analogy
It
here,
gets round to the same thing. Now, that is one way of looking at it. The other second way of looking at it is also like saying that because he's the Chief Justice of the Federation, when he empanels a body to hear a case, therefore he decides what that case is, because he's the one who empaneled them. It doesn't happen that way. Those justices, they have minds of their own, and they make their own independent judgment. And, it's easy for people to make some of these arguments, but that's not what happens.
Well, the point is that we need clarification.
Yes, that's precisely what I'm explaining.
Most people in the public don't even know what the National Judicial Council is, so they need to understand it.
That's not how it operates.
Right.
The members of the National Judicial Council, they have minds of their own. And in instances, they disagree with the Chief Justice. And they decide things based on their own convictions. That would be, if your argument or their arguments were to hold, that would more or less effectively be presuming that all the appointments, judicial appointments that are made in Nigeria, they are the products of the Chief Justice, because he controls all of them. But that's not the way.
Well, it's very specific to the council, which has a limited number of people.
But it's the
and which the Chief Justice heads.
The appointment goes through the council.
Right.
The appointment goes through the council. Different other things go through the council. Issues relating to judicial officers, they go through that council. But the point I am making, and this is what Nigerians need to understand, and really what we should be promoting, we need to have strong institutions. And I think the judiciary is one strong institution. In a strong institution, it does not matter who the head is. You could actually have dissent. That is why in judgments, sometimes you have dissenting opinion. How come you have dissenting opinion? That's because some people do not agree with the lead judgments. And they're all under the same.
Yeah, but they're not
Justice.
appointed by the Chief Justice. Then.
There you go. Their appointment went through the same NJC.
Right.
So their appointment went through the same.
Right. Okay.
body.
Well, let's change direction slightly, because I mean I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I'm glad that you're certainly shedding a lot of light on areas that most people don't actually know anything about. But of course, all this is complicated by the fact that it's coming just about 33 days before the elections, because of course the judiciary plays a key role in settling election disputes in Nigeria. And if you have a key member of the judiciary on trial, that potentially raises major concerns. What is your take on that theory? Obviously, we don't know for sure whether there is a plot.
There's several questions that make it look, there are several issues that make it look not so straightforward, raises the perception of actually somebody attempting to do something that is not exactly quite right. Now, the declarations that they are talking about, these declarations relate to the period before the Chief Justice was appointed as the Chief Justice. The executive branch.
But they happened at a time when he was acting.
He was acting. He was acting before they confirmed him.
Right.
Right?
But he filed those things at a time when
he was acting.
Yeah.
Fine.
So why wasn't it properly done?
I did not say he did not properly do it.
Right.
But the issue that I'm raising is different. I am saying before he was appointed,
right,
didn't this same agency, this same government agency who has a responsibility for having to vet and make sure that people who are going to be appointed have done things right and proper, didn't they have access to these same records?
Well, you have a point there. Yes. In other words, it is worrying, and I would concede that, that the allegations against the Chief Justice were only made last week. And within days, they've investigated the charges that were filed, and he's already summoned to court.
Yes.
I mean, given that, and as I said, that's a good point, given that the Nigerian judiciary is notorious for its slow pace, I mean, is there concern at the speed of the case, which is what you're expressing, and perhaps a lurking fear that there are other issues behind this move?
Not only the speed of the case, but the fact that this is something that the authorities, they actually had the opportunity and they used their security agencies to investigate to be sure that this was a fit and proper person to occupy that office. So how could this have escaped them? Or could it be that they had seen it and they were simply keeping it for an opportune time? They can use it?
Well, obviously somebody filed a petition.
Only last week.
Yes, and they acted
within
upon
24.
Right.
I don't know whether you looked at the sequence. It was received on the 9th.
Yes.
And by the 10th, the charges were already drafted.
It does raise questions, I have to say.
So for somebody like me, and I'm not alone, it makes it look as if this was meant for a purpose, simply because... And then, very suddenly, by the 11th, you already have a hearing date of Monday for the matter to come up.
Yes, it is quite astonishingly fast. I mean, if all the other cases were this fast, Nigeria would be well ahead, wouldn't it? But what would be the punitive consequences for the Chief Justice of Nigeria if, in the end, he's found guilty? I mean, having filed it, refiled it, properly done it, and all of that sort of thing, what would be the punitive consequences?
That depends actually on, it's at the discretion of the body that can try it. The NJC, for example, they would look at the law and they would determine,
Right.
are they defenses that can avail the Chief Justice in regard to this matter? That depends on a raft of
Right.
issues.
And we know that no serving Nigerian Chief Justice has ever been charged and sent to trial whilst in office. What sort of precedent does this now set?
Well, that's precisely why we of the Nigerian Bar Association specifically use the word that the judiciary should not be desecrated. We need to have an institution that people respect, that people believe these are wholesome and proper people. And there are ways, assuming that there was an infraction, truly an infraction, that the Chief Justice or any other judicial officer had engaged in. There are ways that those things get managed and done. And if you need to still dispense with that justice, you can do it. And it does not, the drama that we have had in the last several days would not be there. For me, one of the critical things, follow the due process. We don't need to have that drama.
But that's what I'm saying. If they, because clearly they will probably now be forced to follow the process.
I'm hoping so.
I just wondered if there was a constitutional provision, if you don't declare your assets and all that sort of thing, what the penalty is for that.
Yeah, there are provisions, but you see, the thing is, before we get to the penalties, then we need to know, are there defenses? And that is why I'm saying the proper body would have a look at it. And by the way, when that body looks at it, if there's any person who doesn't feel satisfied with whatever the body has decided, there is always a room to go on appeal.
Right. But it is fair to say for the naive public, and that includes most of us, that this process in the end could lead to the removal or resignation of the Chief Justice, because even if he isn't ousted as a direct result of the court case, in other words, whether he's found guilty or not in court, his reputation might have been so left in tatters, and by extension the reputation of the judiciary, that he would have no choice but to quit.
Not necessarily. And I say that because if Nigerians also understand that the entire essence of what was hashed was to arrive at that conclusion, or to arrive at that point, most unfairly, then it behoves Nigerians to also say, no, we must not arrive at that conclusion. If, for example, in the initial days of the Saraki trial, that type of conclusion were to be made, Saraki would not remain today as Senate President. He would have been done for a long time ago. So I think it is also important for Nigerians to recognize this particular evil of having to call a dog a bad name simply because you want to hang the dog. We should not allow it to become a part of our polity. It is totally, totally, totally wrong. And that is one of the things that the Nigerian Bar Association is completely against.
Paul Usoro, President of the Nigerian Bar Association, I want to thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much,
Thank you for
Charles.
coming in, and thank you for your very clear explanations.
Thank you very much, Charles.
You're watching Nigeria, the road to 2019. Plenty more still ahead, including as the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, rolls out its guidelines for the upcoming election. A coalition of 61 political parties threatened to head to court to try to stop the commission from implementing them. We speak with the chairman of one of the parties. Stay with us.